Music. It's everywhere all the time. Music can grab onto you and never let go, becoming an enduring, long-lasting passion. And for one lifelong New Yorker living in the cultural capital of the United States, this axiom could not be more true. This is the story of a CUNY graduate who became a Pulitzer Prize winner and his deep-rooted, never-wavering love of music. Imagine walking into the old Metropolitan Opera House in New York City, that cathedral of classical music in America, for the first time. And imagine you're seeing your first performance at this iconic venue. And now, try to imagine you are 12 years old, and you're sitting in awe as the company performs the 5-hour Die Meistersinger von Nürnberg, the opera written by Richard Wagner. So big, so beautiful, so much what his dreams had told him it would be. But the thing, as fresh in his mind today as it was on November 25th, 1927, was the sound of that first C major chord when Otto Bodansky brought down his baton. These were the words of Harold Charles Schonberg, written 39 years later in the third person about this formative experience at the Met Opera. In his column, printed in 1969 in the New York Times, Schonberg, as a seasoned music critic, reflects on this moment, one that set him on the path for the rest of his life. The chord rose to the dress circle, and he felt as though he could reach out, touch it, caress it. He had been to concerts before, but somehow, in this vast, dark auditorium, there was a different feeling to the texture and even the organization of this chord. It sounded warm and cozy. It covered him like a blanket. The Wagner opera affected him deeply, so much so that it set him on his career path. In 1981, in his collection, Facing the Music, he wrote, "When I was 12, I resolved to be a music critic. I figured out that to get paid for doing the thing I loved best, listening to music and comparing performances, was the life for me." But the influence of music in his household plays a key part in his prize-winning story. Schonberg was born in Washington Heights in 1915 and was raised in Brooklyn. He learned piano at a young age from his aunt, Alice Friska, herself a famed pianist of the 1920s. But it was his father's collection of Red Seal records on the Victor label, featuring stars like Enrico Caruso, that captivated him at a very young age. Caruso, Tchaikovsky, the Boston Symphony, these records stuck with him. And while he continued learning piano, he later wrote, "My only real talent was listening," and listen he did. Living in Brooklyn, he enrolled at Brooklyn College, taking all the music courses he could. He wrote an early piece during this time for the Musical Advance, graduated, and moved on to NYU, where he earned a master's degree. In 1939, he got his first paid job for American Music Lover magazine, working out of the Astor Place Bible House, where he was an editor, critic, writer, proofreader, and floor sweeper. This was the early days of vinyl records. Thousands of classical records were coming out every year, and he was the record editor at the magazine. It got to be a terrible chore, but there were compensations, all kinds of new music to hear, new artists to evaluate, new audio techniques to explore. In my apartment, there were records on shelves, in closets, under the bed. It was a golden time for vinyl, but the Second World War came, and Schonberg enlisted. He was denied as a pilot because he was pastel blind. He became a paratrooper and broke his leg jumping from a plane, which caused him to miss the D-Day jump. He ended up being a cipher in Britain and stayed in the Army until 1946. What is it to be a music critic? Schonberg wrote deeply about his vocation. In 1981, he reflected that The senior music critic has the last word. He is the expert. Music critics, after all, are in effect telling Rudolf Serkin how to play the piano, Zubin Mehta how to conduct, John Vickers how to sing, and to do that, one must have a lifetime of background and knowledge to fall back upon. And to get to this point, one might have to be afflicted. I cannot remember ever not listening to music, wrapped in it, living with it, and living it, totally responding to it. For Harold Schonberg, there was no other path. After the war, he worked for the New York Sun. He was a reporter on the city beat, while also reviewing records. This led him being hired at the New York Times, eventually succeeding Howard Taubman and given the title of senior music critic. Right or wrong has surprisingly little to do with criticism. Criticism, rather, has to do with concept, with idea, with an effort to pass the creative processes of somebody else's thought through a critical filter and throw light on the work. It is a critic's job to make a reader think, and beyond that, there's little he can do. It was during this 20-plus year career at the Times where he made his mark. He wrote daily reviews and a Sunday column, writing on everything and anything to do with classical music and the New York and international scene, opera at the Met, Mahler and Bach, and Vladimir Horowitz. No one but Horowitz plays so brilliantly voiced a piano, and no one has this particular kind of sonority. Schonberg also wrote of travels abroad to places like Russia and China, about summer festivals, trends, and new composers. After 11 years, he won a Pulitzer Prize in 1971, the first music critic to do so. His work cited from that year ranged from a piece on the state of Russian classical music to the robbery of the International Piano Library, and an appreciation of Peter Maxwell Davies. In 1972, he covered the famous World Chess Championship in Reykjavik between Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky. And as well as working for the Times, he wrote books on the almost exclusively male great pianists, composers, and conductors of history. Later, Schonberg wrote about his life as a music critic. My ideas about newspaper criticisms are simplistic. My paper pays me to go to a musical event and write what I think about it. I'm perfectly aware of the responsibilities of a powerful critic, and of course, the Times critics are ipso facto powerful critics. But as long as a critic maintains his integrity, plays no favorites, works out his love for his art, has a passionate conviction, and brings to his work a background equivalent to that of the musicians he's reviewing, he can do no more. From a young boy whose love of music started almost from birth, who wrote, "I also discovered that I had a strange sort of disease. Music was always in my head, waking and sleeping." There seemed no other path, then, for Harold Schonberg, having failed to become a pianist, to write about music for all of his lifetime. There was no real job, at least through the years. I was never conscious of working. The hours spent in preparation, in reading and studying, were not work. They were a pleasure. Perhaps if the editors of the world at large realized it, something terrible would happen. I would be a millipede exposed to the sun, facing certain death. So I quietly went my way, bowing 3 times to the east every morning for my good luck.